of other commitments and stuff. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of TU Dublin Students Union, or TU Dublin SU, as we're currently being referred to on the internet, for taking the time out of your day and your evening to be with us here today. And I might just go, I'm going to start in my top left corner and go clockwise, and just get you to introduce yourself. So in my top left-hand corner, I have the lovely Steph. Steph, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Awkward, because I'm not in the top left hand of mine. I'm like, oh. Anyway, hello, hi, I'm Steph. Nice to meet you all. And for the people listening, I'll give you a bit of a background about me. I'm the current Miss Gay Ireland. I'm a mental health advocate. I have a background in community development, and I am currently doing my master's in the third sector in community management. So,
Brilliant.
a bit about me.
Thanks very much, Steph. And just below you there on my screen, I have Casey. Casey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name is Katie Woods. I'm 23 years of age. I am a survivor of suicide and a writer. My background, I have struggled with mental health quite some time, but I've come through it. I'm recovering, and I'm just here to try, inspire and empower.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Next on my screen I have Nitsoki.
Yeah, hi guys. So my name is Nzaki. I've been in Ireland for about 18 years now, so everybody calls me CK. The easiest way to remember it is like Calvin Klein, just I don't have the money, just yet. I keep putting that in there, yet. I will have that money one day. Thank you so much for having me part of this. I currently work as a career coach. I've actually have a degree in psychology and masters in HR, and I'm back in college now part-time studying to become a counsellor. So I'm doing counselling and psychotherapy. I aged up in that. Similar to Katie, I've struggled with mental health before in the past, and all I want to do now is really just kind of encourage and empower other people who may be going through it, just so that they know that it's a journey, not a sprint. There is no basic finish day or that we'll be coming out of it, but that also you are not the only person who has ever felt the way you do. And I'm also just a mental health advocate, and I get involved in as much as I can. Yeah, so that's really me in a nutshell.
That's brilliant, thank you so much. Sarah, would you like to go next? You're next on my screen.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for inviting me tonight. My name is Sarah Phillips. I'm a trans and intersex activist, currently the chair of Transgender Equality Network. A little bit older than everybody else, I think, here. So I think, you know, I work mostly in trans rights as a voluntary role, but also both on a national and global level. But my heart more is in around support and providing good guidance on mental health for our community here in Ireland. I've been working in this area now for over 40 years, and hopefully I will continue to work in it for a long, long time yet. So thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant, and thanks for being here. And now, Aisling, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Lesley. My name is Aisling O'Brien. I am the counsellor for TU Dublin on the Tallaght Campus. My background is I'm a psychologist. That was my training. I'm working for a long, long time in Tallaght. And before that, I worked briefly also in I worked in Waterford Institute of Technology, again in student counselling. So I'm a long time working in this area. And I'm delighted to meet all of you and interested in some of the questions you sent on to me, Lesley. They're very good ones. So looking forward to it.
Brilliant. I suppose I better introduce myself in case anybody doesn't know who I am. I'm the VP for Welfare and Equality on the Tallaght Campus of TU Dublin, and I'm delighted to be here this evening as part of our Mental Health Week. So I suppose to get us started, each of you have very unique and different backgrounds in regards to mental health and your journeys with mental health, and I suppose Aisling as well from the perspective of working with students. So maybe and there's no particular order to this. We can maybe somebody wants to jump in and we can take turns. If anyone wants to start by telling us maybe about your journey and how your experiences shaped maybe your journey into being a mental health advocate, because many of you mentioned being like advocates for mental health and how important that was. So maybe how your personal experiences have shaped that or influenced that area of your career. And whoever wants to start can start us off. Don't all rush at once.
I can, I don't mind.
Yes, Steph, go
Well,
ahead.
may as well. So a little bit about my personal journey with mental health. Obviously people tuning into this, just to be whole like trigger warning situation, you know, we are talking about sensitive materials, just to let everyone know. Yeah, no, I actually attempted suicide about 4 or 5 times. So yes, I would call myself a survivor in that sense, but it also, I was very lucky with the support system I came into, but then I also kind of realized that not everyone was as fortunate as me with the support I had. For quite a long time, I didn't actually realize that I was depressed or suicidal. I was actually very much in denial about the whole situation, which a lot of people usually are. So it was kind of the whole not knowing for me is really what pushed me to become so passionate about mental health and the advocacy behind it. I was already studying community development when I actually ended up having to use PHS services. And you know, they're not for everyone, but they worked for me, you know. But it was the fact that I didn't know that I had mental health issues. And again, I was very lucky with the family support, but when I actually went looking for supports in different situations, I didn't quite get them. So I just wanted to bridge that gap and bridge the steps, say that I saw those, say, potholes in the road. I was like, okay, well, I know what they are, so why can't I help fix them? So that's just a little bit about my background and why mental health has influenced me. And now, as a community development worker, I get to deal with people every day who are either having good days, bad days, have good or bad mental health, whatever it is. So I actually get to make it part of my daily working life, which I love. And I love being able to help people.
I don't mind going next. So, with my journey, it sounds really weird. I had the typical upbringing and didn't face as many challenges like yourself, Steph, in the sense of what you've been through. It started really when I came out for the first time. So that's where it happened with me. Actually, funny story, Steph, just to go on with what you said, you're Miss Gay Ireland. I was Miss Gay Dublin in 2018. Hey, girl. So it started out when I came out, and coming out, my parents were very Christian, so was my entire family. It was very hard for me because it also felt like an identity thing, because being classified as a lesbian, you're supposed to talk a certain way, dress a certain way, and I didn't want to change who I was as a person. It was just because the person I fell in love with was not someone that I had dated or had relations with in the past. So at one certain stage, me and my family weren't talking, and it was really hard for me because I felt extremely alone, and that there was no one who would fully understand my flight and basically what I was feeling. And that's actually how I came across tea. And like Steph said, it worked for me. Might not work for everybody, because I do know some people who don't specifically see it as something that would kind of help them with their current situation. But I had to learn a lot about myself in regards to coping mechanisms. And this journey went on for a while, and it started impacting other areas such as my job and areas like that. And what I actually did with it afterwards is I started podcasts speaking about mental health. And it was more in the sense of where my darkest days, I felt that there was not a single person on this earth that would understand the heartache that I was feeling, the turmoil that was going through me, in the sense of, if I choose, the road A, it means that I get to be happy. I get to be with the person that I want to be with, and I'm happy. But there's no family with that happiness. Some of my friends as well will not be on with me on this journey. And then if I choose option B, it means that I suppress everything that I feel, and I basically play the part, but I still have my support system in place. I still have my friends and my family. And I just, for some reason, thought that there was no one else that would ever experience this. And it kind of led me down a road as well, just when it comes to body image issues and, not being able to gain weight. I got really sick and actually ended up in hospital over it because it was just so stressful for me. And the podcast that I started was more just to talk about, I wanted to get people more comfortable with speaking about mental health issues and how they can occur. But I also wanted to have an outlet, so that if I was to be very fortunate to have a guest on who was very open and transparent about what they've been through and talked about the journey itself and the challenges, that somebody at home that was listening would be able to identify with that, feel inspired from it and empowered, and be like, if that person can do that, then so can I. I'm very fortunate support system now, and it all did work out. But there was one stage where I had to think about being on this world by myself and how I would be if I was by myself. So yeah, that's really the journey in a nutshell. Yeah.
So I think I might go next. So my mental health journey, I actually took down a quote yesterday because I was like, this is me. So the quote is, it's from a poem. Two roads diverged in a wood and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So I'm 23 years of age. But when I was 11 years of age, I was getting cyberbullied. And there was a message left on my Bebo profile from one of the girls in my class. And the Bebo profile said to do the world a favor and go kill myself. And that was the first time I thought about suicide. I was 11 years of age. At 12 years of age, I attempted suicide. At 13 years of age, I was hiding that I was suicidal. And then at 14, I ended up being hospitalized as an adolescent because I was so suicidal. And the thing was, like, I remember I spent 4 years in hospital. I spent 4 years in psychiatric care from 14 to 18. And I remember, you know, people used to say to me, like, Katie, you know, what's going on? And in my head, the only thing that was going around my head was the message from that girl, do the world a favor and go kill myself. And I felt I owed it to the girls that were bullying me to end my life. It would make the world a better place. So I struggled with it for a very long time. And then at 21, I started modeling. Now, I was blessed to be somewhat attractive and young, and I felt like I had my whole world ahead of me. But there was this ongoing battle of owing it to people to end my life, that I wasn't worth this life, I wasn't worth being alive. And on the 9th of March 2019, I made my most serious attempt and I got hit by a speeding train. So after that, I was airlifted to hospital. I was placed on life support. I'd shattered spine. My leg had been amputated off on the tracks. It was very horrific. It was chaotic. You know, when my family got the call to say I'd been hit by a train, they thought, she's finally succeeded. 10 years of trying, and she's finally succeeded. And somehow, no matter how much I wanted to die at the time, my body fought, and it fought to survive. So I was on life support and I was surviving and I was breathing. And somehow 6 weeks later, I was awake and I was alive. And I remember when I woke up, I looked at my family and I knew something bad had happened, but I couldn't remember actually what had happened. And I remember looking like around the ward and the machine, and it said spinal injury, and I thought, God, they must have had no beds in A&E. Must be a Crohn's flare-up or something. Absolutely no idea that 6 weeks prior I had walked out in front of a speeding train trying to die. And when I woke up, I wasn't sure if I was going to walk again. I needed a prosthetic leg, and, you know, for what crazy as it sounds, but for the first 2 months in hospital, I was alive and I was there, but I wasn't able to speak. I wasn't able to move any of my body. So my worst nightmare had happened. I was pretty much paralyzed from my suicide attempt, and I was feeling every feeling I had been trying to escape. The heartache, the grief, the sadness, everything I had tried so hard to push out of my life. There was suddenly no getting away from it. And I remember lying in ICU and thinking, if only I could magically get these cords to wrap around my neck. I still wanted to die. I thought in my head, oh, holy God. And I remember I was crying in ICU and the nurse said to me, you know, it's okay. And I looked at her and I thought, it's okay. I have a shattered spine. I have broke all my front teeth. I have lost part of my limbs. And you were telling me it is okay. It is so far from okay that I can't even cope. And I guess the 2 months lying in the hospital bed, I just had to lie there and feel. And the thing was, my friends and my family came in and they were absolutely devastated. They were so devastated that I had got to this place, and the shock that they were in, thinking that I was going to die. And I was just so hard to, you know, put other people first. Like, I thought people were trying to punish me in this life. And I thought, how the hell have I survived getting hit by a train? Like, this is the worst thing ever. But somehow I got my prosthetic leg and my spinal surgery was a success. So suddenly I wasn't paralyzed anymore. I was breathing on my own. I was able to, like, you know, come around. My body was trying so hard to function. And few months in, about 3 months in, I remember I was scrolling on Facebook and I had seen that there was a fashion show. And before my accident, before my suicide attempt, I had modeled as a way of trying to, like, prove the bullies wrong. Oh no, I am worthy, I am beautiful, completely throwing it out there even though I didn't feel it myself. And I remember thinking, oh, I would have walked in that fashion show. But, you know, Katie, you did what you did and basically your life is over. But somehow, no matter what everyone told me, I had this in my head. No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk in the fashion show. I'm going to walk with a prosthetic leg. I'll probably be hopping. I'll be limping. I don't have my front teeth, but I'm going to do it. And my family and the doctors, they thought, she's not going to do it. There's absolutely no way possible she's going to do it. It's going to take her 18 months to recover from what she's just done. Well, my accident was on the 9th of March 2019, and on the 18th of June I walked down that fashion show and I walked with my prosthetic leg, and I overcame every expectation of me. And after that, as much as I had a death wish, I knew I was alive. And while I didn't want to be alive, I was alive, and I was alive for a reason. Now, it's been 19 months since the attempt. So in them 19 months, it has been hard. It has been a lot of therapy, a lot of journaling, a lot of breakdowns. But somehow today, I'm 23 years of age. I haven't had a suicide attempt this year. I got engaged to my best friend and I moved into my new home. So why I am so passionate about like advocating for mental health is because I'm like, guys, I got hit in the face by a train and I still look okay. I'm still here and I'm still fighting and I'm still trying to empower you all. And I guess my survival story is my strength. And yeah, basically that is just me, and that's who I am, and that's why I'm here, to try show people that there is light after the darkness. You just have to find it.
That's an incredible story, Katie, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. Maybe Aisling might have a few words after that. We've come to Sarah as well also. Maybe Aisling, after hearing that, you might have a few words from a counsellor perspective or for the students.
Yeah, I think it's incredible the resilience that people have. You know, it's absolutely phenomenal. I thought your story, Katie, is really inspiring to everybody. And that after you'd actually hit the worst low of all, you know, after the most brutal suicide attempt and ending up in hospital, at the moment where you had to be still and sit with all of those really painful emotions, that's the moment where you started to rise up again.
Yeah.
I think it's phenomenal, the resilience that people have. Absolutely. I'm struck by it all the time by students who come to me for counselling, and just in kind of assessing or asking them a little bit about their history the first time they come. And I would just be astounded that they're sitting in front of me and not only doing that, but doing a degree. Because some of the things that people have had to overcome, some of the trauma, some of the challenges, some of the chaos, it's absolutely phenomenal that people can find it to find the place where they can survive and keep going and even rise up above it. So I'm absolutely inspired by all of that, and it's why I love my job. So thanks, Katie, for sharing that very much.
And Sarah, sorry, I'd just like to give you the opportunity there to add, to answer that question.
Yeah, first of all, kind of like, thank you, Katie, for sharing that. I mean, I think every one of us, when we go through our issues with mental health, you know, you can get so low and you can go so far, but, you know, what you've come through is amazing, I have to say. And you know, as Aisling said, the resilience to be here even today and be able to speak about it, because I think that sometimes is the hardest part, even to be able to, you know, recognize it and speak about it. Because I do know for my own self, you know, I've been coming on this journey for a long time. You know, in my very teenage years, I was struggling heavily with being, you know, at the time, not even having sometimes the language about being transgender, and about, you know, we're talking about Ireland of the 1970s, long before any of you were born, and a very different, I suppose, world that we lived in. And I had no real sense of where I could have a journey that I could, you know, be myself as the way I saw myself. And also with having an intersex condition, developing a body that was very different to how my gender was assigned at birth. So it was a big struggle, and I had my highs and lows. But I suppose I was lucky in my teenage years that I had a certain amount of resilience to be able to come through that. But it became very difficult in my late 20s. It got it. I think while there was lots of kind of suicidal thoughts, I never actually got to that point. But because what I ended up doing was burying myself in alcohol for a long time. You know, so it kind of, that's where it took me. It put me in very dangerous situations, and maybe they were the kind of having that death wish subconsciously was probably there now in hindsight when I talk about it, but it was never something that was a conscious thought for me there. But by the time I got to, you know, my early 30s, I knew I had to do something about this. I knew I had to find support, find help, and I did for a number of years. But even then, I still didn't know how I was going to transition, how I was going to live in this world as myself. Because even at that stage, I had got married in my 20s. I had children, and there was that brought responsibilities that I felt I could never walk away from, or I could never leave behind, or I did not want to live without. And that was the biggest one. It was that I didn't want to live without more so than I was ever going to walk away from them. And that was difficult. And I think what it drove me then, having come away and from alcoholism and then going kind of getting you know, getting away from it, it drove me back there again, you know, in my latter part of my 30s. And it was actually those support networks with friends that actually kind of started to realize what was happening with me, and got around me and made me realize, you know, that I needed to sort myself out, sort my life out, find a way that I needed to deal with the problems that were going on in my head. And I was always struggling, I have to say, through all those years. I was looking for help. I'd been to psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors, and very few of them understood the issue, and very few of them understood or was willing to accept what I was telling them, which I found is a real struggle. before I could actually find somebody. That was a struggle for, that was a big piece of it. But I think, like, even coming out of that and finding a way through those problems and through that kind of depth of depression that I went through, you know, I still think even today it is a constant battle for work on it, continually work on my mental health, because it doesn't matter how out there you are, there's still all of these issues somewhere there in the back of your mind, and you're constantly having to make sure that you're working on positive mental health for yourself. And I do that every single day of the week, constantly battling with it. And when you put yourself out, you know, as an activist or an advocate for anything, whether it's, in my case, trans or intersex rights, or whether it's even working, you know, with our community. And that's how I found myself here, working with the community, because I did not feel that the support mechanisms were there for our community, you know, 25, 30 years ago. And I put myself in there, even though I was still struggling myself. I felt that these were things we needed to speak about. So yeah, I mean, it's a constant journey, I think, for every one of us.
That's really interesting there, Sarah, what you mentioned about substance misuse and using substances as a way, and sometimes like even in a almost in a unconscious self-harming way, because you were putting yourself, as you said, in maybe dangerous situations, putting yourself in harm. And I think that's a really interesting aspect to mental health, is kind of substance misuse and self-medication. So I'm just wondering what our panelists, what the rest of you maybe think on that, or if you have comments on how substances are used or misused, particularly maybe by women or by the student population, by a younger generation who maybe struggle to deal with mental health issues or negative mental health, and how do you think that maybe we could perhaps combat it, or do you think it is an issue that it's being used to mask mental health? It's like emotional escapism nearly. And that's open to anybody, so jump right in there, whoever wants to.
I can, again, I don't mind.
Go for it.
I suppose I have experience on a students' union as well. So I've seen students from both aspects, from being a student to actually being in a position where students will come to me. And I think there is this misconception with students that if they take a pill that things are going to go away. And not necessarily, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be anything hardcore. But I mean, I even had students coming to me who were on caffeine tablets so they could stay awake, so they didn't have to sleep, because when they slept, they dreamt, and when they dreamt, it was nightmares, you know? So it's even something as far as like a caffeine tablet. People tend to self-medicate, in my opinion, to escape. It's escapism. And it's very much a different form of self-harm that people don't see, or that people don't acknowledge, in my opinion. And very much the way people compensate with food, they compensate with everything. I mean, for me, eating it was my form of self-harm. You know, I would just overeat to the point, and it was just, in my head and in Irish culture, it was called comfort eating, you know. Not necessarily. But yeah, no, definitely. I think students, it's a lot of escapism, because the pressures they face when they come from, if it's a student coming from secondary school straight into college, it's a completely different world. Like, there's so much structure in a secondary school, and you're going to college, and it's like this weird freedom that you get to be who you are, you get to go party and socialize. Obviously this year is a bit of an exception, I apologize, but you know, it's that kind of a thing. It's an escapism, but it's this new reality is what you're trying to escape from, because you don't know how to keep up with it. So I think I think students do self-medicate, but maybe just, it is something that needs to be looked at, but it's how, right? We'll look at it as the question.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Maybe Aisling, you might want to.
Yeah, I might come in there. I suppose my feeling on it will be this, from years of working in counselling with students, is that a lot of these things are just poor coping strategies. People don't have anything else to draw from, and they've got to survive. So using substances, self-harming, controlling eating, gambling, using sex as well. You know, there's a load of different areas. It's any of those compulsive behaviors that people don't have control over. And I suppose I'd make a distinction between, there's some people who fall into, binge drinking and binge recreational drug use and that. And then they get themselves out of it because there isn't an underlying issue, there. But then there's people who are using substances to cope and using other things. How do you deal with that? Well, if somebody has something else to cope with, they don't need the other maladaptive coping strategy. So, one of the core things in counselling is, someone might come in and they might be doing something that's not a great coping strategy, but you don't try and take it away from them before you've given them something else. Because if somebody just has one crutch and then you take it away, they're going to fall flat on the ground. You have to give them some kind of scaffolding or structure, and then you can start taking away the things that don't work. Because you replace one poor coping strategy with something else and something better. And then at that point, they can start to pull away from the more self-destructive coping strategies.
I think that's really important. It's really important, I think, that we're acknowledging the fact that if they're using it, as you say, in a maladaptive way, but that they need that that's their crutch, that you can't just say, don't do that, that's bad, even though your insides might be screaming that, and it might seem, but just to bear that in mind. And I suppose that's something for people, our attendees as well, maybe, to, when they're with their friends and stuff, to bear that in mind, to direct people to professionals who can help them, rather than just kind of, sometimes people can be overly critical and be like, no, don't do that. It's, whereas, as you say, they need it as a coping mechanism. Does anyone else have any thoughts or more thoughts on
I was just going to agree with Ashing just in regards of the coping mechanism. I remember when I first started therapy, so like me falling out with my parents, I didn't feel as if it was that deal, but obviously it was very close to me. But one of the first things that I got asked was, what are your coping mechanisms? Because like I would be in the office and like nearly crying while I'm typing, so I was trying really hard to act like everything was okay, but obviously my face just gives it away like very easily. And I didn't realize that a lot of the times when these situations arise and you do look to the likes of self-harm, trying to control your eating and everything like that, is because maybe it's one of the things where we need to have coping mechanisms or things that we use to cope that aren't detrimental. And I think a lot of students don't have that. Or else it might be something such as like sports or going to the gym, but it becomes so obsessive then that it's not really helping you cope anymore. It's just something else, another crutch that you have. So I think with the whole self-harm and everything like that is maybe when it comes to students, it's just exploring the different ways that you can cope with extremely high pressure situations where you're not looking at, things such as alcohol, drugs, or, the likes of smoking and things like that as well. Where you're able to actually be like, right, I'm having a really bad day, this is what I'm going to do. But to have it be more of a habit, but also trying to switch in your brain, where, because obviously like when you drink and you smoke, it just, all your inhibitions are gone and you don't think about the issues as well. But if you get lost in something that you really enjoy, it might help you a little bit better to be able to cope with the situation that you're going through. But I do think that just with the self-harm, a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we were never taught how to cope when things get really, really bad. We were never told, my specific upbringing was always in the sense of, this is life is not fair. And that's just the way you have to deal with it, is that you need to get up, dust yourself off and keep going, because nobody's going to be here to feel sorry for you. Nobody's going to be here to mollycoddle you or make you be better, or you're being constantly told about somebody else who's in a way worse position than you. So then you're constantly debating with yourself whether your feelings are valid. Are you allowed to feel this way? Because, Mary down the road has an awful time of it. She's nothing compared to you. So you really should be grateful. So then you keep having those. So it's trying to battle those. So I think it's just we need to be taught how to cope from a young age, so that when we get to that stage where we are adults, or when we get to times where things get really, challenging and the situations just aren't easily for us to adapt to, that we have that conversation of like, okay, I have 3 or 4 or 5 coping mechanisms. This is how I'm going to be able to do it. So then that way it's less likely to, because if you think about a girl and a boy break up, what are the first things that your girlfriends tell you to do? You're going to get dressed up, you're going to go out, have you get your hair done, it's all these things. And then you're always ending up in that situation where you're drinking. Same thing with guys. And they break up with the girlfriend. It's like, oh no, we're going to get you a new girlfriend tonight to make you feel better. And it's going out, and you're in that situation now where you're smoking and drugs and alcohol. So it's easy to be like, well, this seems to help with the heartache. This seems to help with, the lack of worthiness that I feel and things like that.
Absolutely. Does anyone else, anything they'd like to add?
Can I agree, because I think that was something I was just about to come in on. I think one of the biggest mistakes of our education system is that we educate ourselves, our children and our adults, young adults about, and even adults about, how to look for your degree and look for your course and all that. But we never actually educate ourselves on life. We don't educate, young adults coming through second level on how to create coping mechanisms. And I know this, even having 3 kids myself, although they're now in their 30s, they struggled through their teenage years and all the problems they went through. And a lot of them mirrored mine. And, I hear from young people today, they're exactly the same problems we're having nowadays. We're just probably coping or using other mechanisms to cope with them. And I think that is a massive piece of work that needs to be done in our education system. It's around working with us to be able to kind of not just, get on with it, but also to be able to have an education around things that we should do when life gets tough, when we don't get told that Mary down the road is having worse problems than us, but that it doesn't matter about what Mary's life is going. She has her own problems, but you have to be ways of being able to deal with yours. And I think that is, crucial, because I know from my experience with young trans people coming out, trying to navigate the world with, very negative stereotypes around trans people, very negative stereotypes around how they can access healthcare, for instance, or even being able to be themselves in, say, 3rd level education. The problem is that they add on extra pressures then, other than just trying to go through 3rd level education. And they have no way of being educating themselves about how to cope with life's pressures generally. And it just seems to be one issue on top of the other. And then the first thing they will do is find a way of either self-medicating, self-harming, or just, as I say, abusing something like alcohol. And I think it's really crucial that we start to put something into place in our education system to talk about mental health at a school-going age specifically, I think, and continue those conversations throughout the whole of our life.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a lifelong process, and it should start from junior school. Why not? Like at age appropriate, using age appropriate language. Before we go any further, Katie, did you have any thoughts on that? Or?
I think one of the things is when we are in Leaving Cert, we have to put our hand up and ask, can we go to the toilet? And then 3 months later, we're in college and we're asked, oh, what drink would you like? There is, we go from such a controlled asking to do everything to absolute freedom. And I think that's where a lot of the problems arise. It's because suddenly we go from one extreme to another, and there is no bridge between that. But I also think it's really important that, when we're in junior infants and we're in senior infants, we're learning how to count, we're learning English, Irish. We should be learning how to love ourselves too. We should be learning how to look after ourselves. Our education system, it focuses on the paperwork, the grades, the word side of it, but there also needs to be holistic healing in it of, how to, like, for example, like your creativity, enhancing your creativity, becoming the person you want to be. I think we're so focused on the intellectual side of it, but we're missing the emotional intelligence side of it. And I think we just need to find a way to try bring in emotional intelligence with intellectual intelligence, bring it all together so that as adults, we not only know geography, history, maths, but we also know how to pay bills. We also know what to do if a panic attack comes on. We also know, we need to be taught how to be humans, not just how to act as humans.
Brilliant. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think there needs to be more of an emphasis, and I do think maybe it's changing slowly. Like, I have a daughter in second class, and I know they do some stuff, but again, her classes are quite small and it's a smaller school. Maybe that's more difficult to do in larger and bigger schools, and maybe it's not set in stone in the curriculum in the way that Irish, English, maths are set in stone in the curriculum. So I definitely think that's something that needs to be maybe pushed forward, and I think conversations like this certainly help that process. We just have a question in here, and I'll put it to the panelists, from one of our attendees, asking advice on what people think, what our panelists think is the best way to speak to a loved one if they have a mental health illness, and they're not really open up about their feelings. If they're worried, I suppose, if they're worried about them, if they're feeling, they notice signs somebody's feeling down, but they're not really talking about it. Would you have any recommendations or advice on how they could maybe approach that?
I can go first, I don't mind. Well, first off, I mean, it's if the question you're asking, if it has come to you with a mental health issue and you're aware of it, fine. But I mean, ask them straight out, are they okay? That would be my advice. Ask them straight out. I mean, if you have a feeling, then there's a reason that feeling's there. And I mean, if in my experience, if I ask someone, are they okay, they don't get offended. If I ask them, are they okay, they're, people are like, oh yeah, I'm grand. Or for me, it was, I noticed with even one or two of my friends, that hesitation, being like, I'm all right. And it's just picking up with it. Use your instincts as your friend or your family. Like, that you know the vibe from them. You go with your gut on this, ask them straight out, are they okay? That would be my advice on it anyway.
Really interested to hear maybe Aisling's perspective as well on that. And do you agree with Steph?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? I've often had people come to me and they're driven demented because they know someone's really suffering and they keep suggesting to them, come and can you go and talk to someone, giving them information about professional services and trying to refer them on, and they won't, they don't want to go, and I suppose there's a few bits to it. When somebody finds it hard to open up, and particularly about these type of things, there's usually underneath it, a lot of shame and defensiveness around it. They see it as a lacking in them and something to be ashamed of. And that's where the stuckness tends to come with it. And that's why the whole destigmatizing of mental health is so very important. And I think it's been very, very successful. I'd have to say I've seen the change in the years of the attitude very dramatically in the last 10 years. And I think among the younger age group, a great job has been done, and it isn't so stigmatized. Where it's still challenging a fair bit is often with older generations. And a lot of that is as well as because, even for me, it was a very different landscape when I was a teenager, and there wasn't language around mental health. There wasn't an open discussion around it. It was still quite hidden. If people ended up being hospitalized, it wasn't discussed. I remember I had a couple of friends who ended up being hospitalized when I was a teenager in various psychiatric facilities. And it was kind of hushed, up well, not hush it, but they just never spoke about it, and we knew about it, and I visited them there. But you know, I remember particularly with one came out and she never referred to it again afterwards, you know, and would be quite, you know, walled off from that kind of a discussion. But I suppose two things just occur to me in it. Like there's no easy answer, but there's two things. Sometimes when we show our own vulnerabilities first, it opens up a conversation. It's amazing if you've ever seen with a group of people or a few people talking and one of them, you know, discloses something personal and emotional, and the next thing everybody's disclosing something. Suddenly it's like it gives permission for that kind of a discussion. So sometimes it's funny, rather than going, can you talk to me? Sometimes disclosing to them or opening up to them first about something you're struggling with can kind of open up the discussion, and it can give it much more permission for the person then might spontaneously start talking about something that's happening for them. It's not always the case, but I find phenomenal often when first suddenly other people are giving that back, you know, to them. So that can be one way. So then the person doesn't feel threatened, like you're saying, what's wrong with you? It's like, this is what I struggle with. And then they don't feel so defensive and they can come out and open up a little bit more. That can be one approach. The other thing I'd say is it's easy to get impatient and frustrated with the person because they won't get help, you know. And I just say it's good, it's hard and challenging, but it's good to be patient with people because they won't come until they're ready. You know, they won't do that until they're ready. And to keep the door open so that whenever they're ready, they know you haven't given up on them, or you're not annoyed with them, or you haven't lost patience with them. It's like, okay, I know you're maybe it's uncomfortable for you now, or you don't want to talk about this now, but to know I might check in with you again in a few weeks' time just to see how things are going. And if you want to talk to me at any point in the meantime, it's great, you know. And if you don't, I respect that as well. And that can be a good approach to use with people as well. But there's no easy answer. There's no button to press that'll make it happen. Sometimes it takes a lot of patience and a fair bit of time.
I think both what yourself and what Steph started off, I think that's really good, and I think it's really sound advice, and I hope that's really helped the person who asked that question, and I think maybe it will help many of the attendees, because sometimes we all have them worries, you know, how do I approach this, you know, what do I do? Just to remind the attendees that they have a few more minutes if they have a few more questions they'd like to ask. I have a couple here, unless anybody has a really strong wants to come in and add to what Aisling said there. I think she kind of covered that quite comprehensively. So if you are happy, I'd like to move on to one of the other questions from the panelists that's in. So here's one, and I really, really like this question. And I think it's something that we'd all struggle with and we can all identify with at times. How do you stop yourself feeling guilty when you take time for yourself if you're so used to putting other people first? And I think that's something that many of us do struggle with at times. We hear these words. I know even my degree was in social care, so we would talk all the time about self-care, but we didn't do self-care, and I can tell you that firsthand because there wasn't time as a student balancing placements and portfolios and assignments, and there just didn't seem to be time. And when you do it, there is that guilt of, oh crap, I have an assignment sitting there and I'm sitting here in a bubble bath. I should, you know, or whatever. So I'd be really interested to hear our panelists' views on if they have any suggestions on how you can stop yourself feeling guilty if you do take time for yourself. I think it's a really good question, and thank you very much for asking it. So anyone, come on.
I'm gonna jump in here. So in the last few months, I'm mad into self-care. I'm constantly pushing my friends, look after yourself, read books, take baths, whatever. But I think for me, one of the things with the guilt of it was, so say, for example, I had to submit a story in a week. And, there'd be that guilt of, oh, I don't have the time to do the self-care. And what I came to realize was that when I took time to look after myself, the results I produced after were a lot more valid and meaningful than prior. So if you're not in a great headspace and you get up in the morning and you have an assignment to do, look, taking 5 minutes or 10 minutes for yourself, you might actually be able to get into a place where you're excited about the assignment or you feel good about the assignment. I think we can't focus on oh, I'm taking time for myself, this is bad. I think what we need to try focus on is, I'm going to take time for myself to do what I can, and I know that after that, I will be able to achieve the best results. And I think for me, that's how I try look at it. It's not about feeling guilty for taking time for myself. It's about looking at it and saying, well, if I take this time for myself to clear my mind or do some meditation, I know that for the next 12 hours of the day, I will be able to focus better and concentrate better. And therefore the guilt is it subsides a bit. That would be my advice, or a little bit of advice.
Brilliant. I think that's really good. Katie, thanks so much. Does anyone say or have you something to add?
I totally agree. I mean, it was coming through my head as Katie was talking. I mean, the point is we have to practice self-care. We all told that as we go through these conversations and as we learn about mental health. But what does practice mean? It actually means that it's something you have to do every day. And the same way as you get up and put clothes on and get a shower and put clothes on, that these things have to be put into your routine. And I think the more you put them into your routine, I think you do start to realize the benefit of them. And I think you do start to realize, how much it benefits for the rest of your day and the rest of your, I suppose, your rest of your life, and how much easier you can navigate life generally. And I think that's crucial. I think it is about, putting it in as something that has to be done every single day. And the more you do that, the more you will realize that guilt tends to fall away. I know that was my experience, because I'm the worst person in the world, I think, for kind of trying to take time for myself. But I started to realize over the last number of years that actually, if I take time for myself here or there, and usually it's time I knows where I am or what I'm doing, it's usually out of the spotlight a little bit. It's kind of like I'm buried in some dusty record shop when COVID wasn't around, going through vinyl records or something, or every morning taking that hour of just sitting and relaxing, and which I'm not normally. I'm normally at 150 miles an hour, sleep for 4 hours a night and keep going. But if I don't stop and take that kind of half an hour for myself every morning, and even a half an hour in the evening, then I'm just not worth anything in the day. So it's about working at the guilt. The guilt will fall away if you work at the self-care, I think, and that's what's crucial. Is you've got to practice it, and what practice means is putting it into your routine.
Brilliant. I couldn't agree more. I'm really impressed. There's a lot of questions kind of popping in here, so I might go to the next question if that's okay with everyone, because I'm conscious I don't want to keep you too long. You've committed your time. The next question is interesting. It's around boundaries. So somebody wants to know what advice on they're struggling, how to manage that boundary piece if you are their only support. But I suppose they don't want to hurt the person, but they need to manage the bit of that self-care piece, I suppose, as well. Aisling, do you want to? It looked like you're muted there. I thought you looked like
yes, yeah. Thanks, Lesley. And if you don't mind, I might answer this, and then I might have to go just because I've kiddies to put to bed and stuff.
Absolutely.
After this. again, that's a difficult one, because of course, if somebody keeps, there's the pressure, you know, if you're, it's a very weighty thing. If you're the only person, you know, you're the only support, and the only person someone's going to with things. And then there's the tendency, and this is what makes it very stressful and weighty, is we can start to feel responsible for that person, you know, and for their well-being. And that's a very burnout with that, you know, over time. I suppose one of the things in it is it would be important to remind yourself in that situation that you can only listen and you're not responsible for making that person better, you know, because the only person realistically who can take the steps and work the process through and get to the other side is the person who's experiencing the difficulty. We'd love sometimes to magically jump into somebody's body and do it for them, but unfortunately we can't. So all we can do, it's a natural thing that when people tell us problems we want to fix, we want to problem solve, you know, we want to make it better, we want to make them feel better. And it can be hard to not try and do that, you know, to just stay in the listening space and not feel the need to try and do that or take on that responsibility. So I suppose the first thing is to remember to try and not do that and not take responsibility for making this person better, but just to listen. Then it's very important, if you're the only person they're going to, they might start to go a lot, you know, and that, I suppose maybe that's what the question really refers to, is what if you're starting to feel a little burnt out with it. And then I suppose one of the things is to say in the nicest, most sympathetic way possible, you know, I'm happy to listen to you, you know, but you know, it's a bit like the blind leading the blind. I'm not a professional, I'm an expert. I'm happy to listen to you, but there's only so much, you're not going to get much further with me. You know, I can't really direct you in the way that might be helpful to, so it will be good to, rather than coming to somebody who can't help you, you know, who doesn't have the expertise to lead you in that direction, you know, really it would be good to go to somebody who can actually help lead you out of the last place that you're in. And then thirdly, again, if they aren't ready to do that yet, to kind of remember to try and keep patience and not, you know, it's easy to get annoyed or stressed out or want to pull away from somebody when you feel there may be, I suppose, demanding more than you can give. So to try and not, to try and remain kind of patient and empathetic with them, but also very much to put on boundaries with it. Like, you know, I don't think because somebody speaks to you, you know, turns to you for support, you have to answer the phone 10 times a day. You know, it's okay to put up normal, healthy boundaries around it like you would with anybody else. And you also have to look, if you get burnt out with them, you won't be able to support them either. You know, if you get burnt out and if it gets too much. So to also kind of put boundaries on it in a very respectful, patient, you know, empathetic way, but to also feel fine to look after yourself within it, because we often feel if somebody asks something of us and has a need, we have to keep responding immediately to it. And the reality is we don't. And just to put in the proviso there, if there's a very risky scenario where someone is a suicidal risk, because that obviously ups the fear around it, and it obviously makes it a more dangerous scenario. That's not, if you're the only person who knows that, it might be a question of looking at that it's time to bring in somebody else into that scenario, because that's not a responsibility you can carry. You don't live with the person. You can't, you know, you don't have the ability to ensure their safety. So it might be, even if, you know, having a discussion with them going, look, somebody needs to know about this, and I need to let somebody know about this for your own safety, because I'm just concerned for your safety. And then look at a family member if that's possible, you know, or a service, or whatever it is. If possible, it would be great to agree with the person who that person should be, but also very much carrying that is not safe for you or for them, carrying that level of knowledge that there's a real risk that they might harm themselves. At that point, that's the point where you need to bring somebody else in, even if the person is not happy. It's just a safety concern, you know, at that point. So that, anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Again, there's no perfect solution with any of that, but that's what I would suggest around it. And just to say, I'm going to have to fly. Lovely to meet you all, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for taking the time to join us, on your honesty and the wise answers that you shared with us. And just to remind our students that are watching, they can access counselling services. They can still access them online. If they go onto the website, or if they email any of their welfare officers, we can give them details as well. So just to remind them that they are there and not to be afraid.
Absolutely. There's counsellors on each of the campuses. There's like 6 or 7 in City Campus. There's a team of them. There's myself and a part-time counsellor in Tallaght, and there's a full-time and part-time counsellor on the Blanchardstown campus. And there's online appointments available each week all the time. It's being done through the Microsoft Teams platform at the moment, or through phone if people prefer.
Yeah,
perfect. So all that information is up there on the TU Dublin counselling page. It kind of directs you to which campus you're part of, and then gives the details, the contact details and other information.
Yeah, so if there's anything.
Thanks, Lesley. Thanks for inviting me, and lovely to meet you all.
Thanks, Aisling. So we have a couple more questions that we can get through, and if there's anything that you would have directed directly to Aisling as the counsellor, you can contact any of the welfare team or on TU Dublin and link in with any of your counsellors on your campuses, just to remind that the students. There's 3 kind of questions here that I would put together really, which is well, the first one is how you would ask for help if you're scared of hurting or disappointing somebody, which one of the other questions around negative self-dialogue. So I kind of think the 2 of them could go together, and they also tie in with another question we've had. So I know they're 3 different questions, but they're in the same area, around advice that you'd give to people struggling with their body positivity, especially with the growth of things like TikTok and Instagram and OnlyFans and all these other different sites that are kind of focused on that. So I'd put the 3 of them together, and I put that out. And Steph, I believe you want to answer, and then we can put it to the other panelists as well.
Just trying to piece all the questions there now. So the first part of it I want to address is, you worried about disappointing someone. How do you ask for help? The thing is, if that person is in your life for a reason, they're not going to be disappointed if you ask for help. And if that person is disappointed, then they're not necessarily the person that should be here. More than likely have people around you that if you ask for help, they will do what they can and they will try and guide you. But it's just, the only person you need to worry about disappointing is yourself, you know, and you don't be afraid to ask for help, because it will push you. And I know, because I've come from it. I've come from a situation where I didn't ask for help for years, and I didn't know how to do it because I thought I knew better. I thought I knew, sure, no, I've lost friends to that, so I wouldn't do it to myself. I wouldn't put my friends or my family through that. And then the more I kind of shoved that down, the only person I was disappointing at the end of it all was myself. So I think it's you are the main person you need to focus on. And like I said, if someone is in your life, they're not going to get annoyed at you for asking for help. You know, if anything, I'd say it'd be quite a relief, because touch wood, if something was to happen and they felt like they weren't there to help you, you know, whereas just ask, always ask. That's my push on that one. The body positivity one, that is an interesting one, because I try to work on it myself all the time, and I'm not an expert. I do not say I'm a a guru of any kind when it comes to body positivity, but I think the best thing you need to do when it comes to looking at yourself, I describe everybody as a mosaic. Every body type, every person, you are built up from the things that you think have broken you, but you're actually just a combination of them all into this beautiful, unique, original pattern. There is no one else like you. And I think you have to, like, my biggest fear was looking in the mirror. Still is. I do a little bob and weave when I brush my teeth in the morning so I don't have to look at myself. But what I would tell you is that you honestly need to believe that you are proud of yourself. And I think self-pride is what people are afraid to do. They think it sounds cocky or overly confident. But it ties in with the self-care thing that even Katie was going on about. That you need to pull pride from yourself where you can, and just realize that you don't have to live up to anyone else's standards. You set your own, and obviously make it achievable and not too over the top. That'd be my advice.
Would any of our other panelists like to add to that?
I just wanted to add on just about the being afraid to hurt someone, with saying that you're asking for help. It's one thing that as humans that we do all the time is that we feel as if, like, if we voice what we have and what we're experiencing, that it's going to make another person feel bad. I felt that exact same way when it came to my parents and my friends. That if I said I'm alone, they'd be like, but we're here. What do you mean you're alone? I think it's just really important to remember that just because you feel a certain way, it doesn't take away from the love of that person, the support of that person, the relationship that you've built as well with that person. Your feelings are your own. And I think we need to start being more comfortable with the idea of, yes, sometimes people will be offended by that, but it's not your responsibility unless you have gone out of your way to hurt somebody with your words, or you've gone out of your way to ensure whether you're doing things to hurt someone. It's different, because if you think about target audience, if you're a social media influencer, you think about target audience, not everybody, the entire world is not going to view. The entire world is not going to follow you and, buy your product or your brand, whatever it may be. There are some people that it's going to go against their beliefs. It's going to go against what they believe is beautiful, and everything like that as well. So it's really important that you remember that as long as your actions don't have malicious intent behind them, then you have every right to voice your opinion, to voice, what you're struggling with, and to be honest about it as well, because the more you lie about the severity of how you're feeling, the harder it's going to get to actually get the help that you need. Especially if it has, and like I said, it's just, I agree with you, Steph, in the sense of, if that person really loves you or is in your life for a reason, then you saying that you are hurting or that you have these thoughts shouldn't impact on your relationship whatsoever. It should rather strengthen it, because for me, I would love it if somebody was very honest with me, to be like, I feel really alone. Yeah, okay, we're together, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I had this magic healing, that my presence alone can make you feel better. I'd love if that happened, but it doesn't always necessarily be the case. So just with that, I would just be very kind of conscious. If you're not if it doesn't have malicious intent behind it, then we need to move away from feeling so guilty about it.
Perfect. I'm very conscious of the time because I know, Sarah, you've had a long day as well and you've got another meeting to get to. There's just 2 more questions that maybe we'll get to, and then we'll wrap it up if that's okay. I tried to wrap it up by 25 past. And just to remind students, if we are giving away self-care pamper packs, so if you'd like to go into the draw for a self-care pamper pack and you are a student, sorry, Steph, you're not a student, you can type your name into the Q&A box. Our lovely Fiona will take note of them, and we will be doing a draw tomorrow just on that. So that you have a bit of time to type your names in if you want, while we're answering these questions. And I'll only be answering the questions that are there, I think, because just to be fair to our panelists, because it has been a long day. So I'll just firstly go to would you, this is one of our, I suppose, around, we did have a question on our, on the list that we had discussed around stigma. And we have a question around people disclosing a mental health disorder when, if they're worried that if they do disclose a mental health disorder, people automatically go to the stigmas associated with that disorder. And so I suppose, how do we break them stigmas, and what would we suggest? The direct question is, would we advise them to talk to lecturers or classmates? I think that's something that they can only decide themselves. So maybe we'll look at the stigmatized side of it, how to break stigmas around mental health. Would you have any advice or suggestions around breaking the stigmas so that maybe people can feel more confident to voice if they are suffering from a mental health disorder or illness? So,
and maybe if you don't mind coming in for a minute, it's I think for me there's a quite a bit of work to be done there. And it shouldn't necessarily always be put on the individual who is suffering with a mental health issue. I think there is an education process, as we've spoken. I think that theme has gone through the whole of this evening. It's about, that we constantly have to talk about mental health issues, whether it's from being a very young individual all the way up to kind of individuals of my age, etc. I think we have to educate the population. We have to educate society that it's okay to talk about mental health. And I think it's also about that there should not be a stigma around these issues. This is something that quite a large percentage of our population suffer from, and we should be, it doesn't matter whether it's in a very mild way or whether it's in a very serious way, we should all be able to talk about these issues. And I think that's the first piece of work that has to be done. There has to be something done in around education and around us being able to understanding that people will want to talk about it. I think for individually, again, I think I'll go back to what I said first. I don't think it should be necessarily our responsibility to break that stigma. I think, however, if you have, going back to something Steph said earlier, if you've got good people around you that they should be in your life, I think they're not going to see and not stigmatize it, I don't think. But I do think if you are public about it, then you're going to struggle with trying to have a mix of different individuals saying it in different ways. And that, again, goes back to what I said about education. I think for me, it's about you picking your family, who you can, talk to, who you can get the support from. And I think it will not be stigmatized within that space. And I think really, does it have to be? No, it doesn't need to be everybody's knowledge. You're dealing with these issues. These are issues are your issues. And I think you find the places you need to go to and find supports that you need to get. But realize that they are there, whether they're in your shorter circle. And going back again to something we were talking about in the last thing is about, those people in your life will be supportive if they should be there in your life. And I think they will. You'd be surprised. I think we put things in our head regularly. We stigmatize it ourselves. We think there are issues there that aren't there. And when we reach out and ask for support and ask for help, I think a lot of the cases, sometimes you will find it if they are within the circles that are there to support you. But I do think it's a broad piece. I don't think we should be putting that stigmatizing, just trying to change the stigmatization of it on the individual. We should be making it more of a societal thing.
100%. I agree. It's not, I think sometimes we look at people and we like to put people, we all do it. We try and put people into boxes, or, we can and categorize them. Oh, you're this person, so you go here. And, we do it. It's a part of our brain function. But I think with that sometimes puts the onus on the person that they're the problem, that that they need to solve that themselves. So because you are this or have this or identify this or whatever, you're the issue. But actually it's about shaping the societal piece and having these type of conversations and that actually break down stigmas in themselves. So having these open and honest discussions and keeping pushing them doors and encouraging discussions and trying to change, I suppose, the education system and looking at it as a wider piece. I really agree with everything you said there, Sarah.
You know, just make one example of that, if you don't mind, is
Yeah.
again, just from my own personal experience. You know, I'm of an age that, and I keep going back to this, but I'm of an age that, you know, when I came out originally, you know, trans people were diagnosed with a mental health disorder. That language changed a number of years ago to a mental dysphoria, like gender dysphoria. It has even moved further now, where it is actually no longer a mental health issue. It is more about incongruence of sexual differences, and that education over what trans people are, for instance, over that last, say, 30 years has made a huge difference to trans people under general society's understanding of what trans people are. And that conversation, I think, has to consistently reflect on mental health issues as a whole. Sometimes it's not necessarily about a disorder. It's a natural issue that we deal with positive mental health or negative mental health. It is something that the whole of humankind have to deal with it. It doesn't matter whether it's of a mild condition or whether it's something more serious. And I think we have to reflect that around the language that we use, around the acceptance that we use, and about how we facilitate, how we facilitate supports, making sure that there are support mechanisms there. When I came out back in the 1990s, there was no support community for the trans community. There was nothing. There were no support groups. There were no place you could go and talk about being trans. You could get no place you could go and find out about anything. But you had to hope that you found somebody who could actually talk to you. That has to stop. We have to create those mechanisms. And I think we are, I think in fairness, society is that conversation starting to open up much more, but it has to be really drilled down and educated into the whole of society that these are things that we should be learning at a very young age.
Excellent. Does anybody else want to add on to that before I get to our kind of final question?
I
Yes.
have just one thing to say, if that's okay. I'm going to give you two statements. So one of them is I have major depressive disorder, but the second is I have brown long hair. Now, for me, what I find with the stigma is, you know, there is so many parts of your personality, there's so many parts of your body, of your being. Don't criticize yourself if you are feeling anxious or if you are feeling depressed, because you're so many other things as well as that. You know, taking away the stigma, we are like, as a whole, you know, you might have depression, you might have trauma, you might have this, you might have that, but you also have kindness and intelligence and generosity. And it's about, if you can't replace the stigma, at least accept that it's only a part of you and it doesn't have to define your whole life. And, you know, coming out and saying I have a mental disorder, that's only one part of you. So if somebody turns around and judges the whole of you on that, they're not meant to be in your life, because you are so much more than a mental illness or a mental disorder or a label that fits a box. And I wanted to say that, you know, even our language and how we talk to ourselves, we are so much more than all these labels and these criteria. So just know, whenever you are down or whenever you are anxious, that you are so many other powerful, meaningful things, as well as that little part of you.
Brilliant. I actually love that. That's a really good way of looking at things. Steph, you wanted to add something there, I think, as well, did you, before we go to our last question?
Yeah, if that's okay. I know we're pushing for time, but just echoing on what Sarah had actually said about when you want to disclose something. And yes, obviously I feel in an ideal world, you should just be able to say things outright, but it's just, for me, it runs parallel to the experience of coming out. It's yes, eventually you'll get to the point where you can talk about it, no problem. But when you originally start, you do need to protect yourself and you need to be careful first. You need to assess who's around you, because at the end of the day, yes, we would love if everybody was out and accepting, regardless of what you were coming out with, or if you were coming out with your sexual orientation or gender identity. But you do have to protect yourself first. And that's what I'm saying is when it comes to mental health, or when it comes to diagnosable mental health status, then just protect yourself. That is a part of self-care right there, is because you are being careful, you are protecting yourself, and you can gauge it then. And that's how you break the stigma, is, I don't know, turn around to someone and be like, oh, when you hear mental health, what do you think of? I guarantee you people are going to start with the negative, but the thing is then you interject, but you can have positive mental health. People forget that mental health can be both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think it's just echoing on what Sarah said. You know, you don't have to tell everybody. Tell who you are comfortable with, and gauge it from there. Because I know, as an example, when I came out, I had backlash. But when I came out with the fact that I was suicidal, I also had a lot of backlash. You know, so it's about gauging, and just gauging where you are safe. And I think that is the main thing I want to push when it comes to mental health, is your own personal safety. That is your self-care in that moment, is you were taking care of yourself and you were being safe.
Brilliant. And there's one final question there, and it ties into kind of the last question that I was going to ask anyway. So I think we'll finish up with it. The question was around somebody being isolated during lockdown, suffering from depression, and cutting themselves off. How to approach that situation. So you can give a piece of advice if you like specifically on that. And the final question that ties in with that, I think, was one piece of advice that you would give students who are suffering, particularly because of lockdown and COVID at the moment. So the two would kind of go together. So I'm happy to end on those questions. Kind of combine them. Just a piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's struggling, particularly because of the current COVID situations, or who is struggling with mental health in general, and how to promote positive mental health or combat negative mental health, whichever aspect you want to take, and just maybe one solid piece of advice. And you can start whichever way is like. Sarah, I don't think you've gone first at all tonight. I'm not sure. Or Natsuki, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
You're okay.
So if one of you maybe want to start, I don't think either of you have started. So if you'd like, one of you would like to start. You can.
I don't mind. So just in regards to the advice about COVID and how to kind of help with your mental health, I've suffered with it a little bit myself, just because I haven't been leaving the house as much as I should. So what I started to do was to go to the shops. It's not that far away, but it's also giving me that like couple of minutes of just actually getting out. My thing is, my piece of advice would be, if you're going somewhere, try to walk as much as you can. I know sometimes walking is not always great. Put on your favorite song. Like, we are living in 2020, we have Spotify. Put on a song from your most 2017 and actually start having that conversation. I actually started walking down the road to Promiscuous by Nelly Furtado. So I remember that was such a tune, and I just completely forgot about it, but I was so focused on, oh my God, what was I doing at that time? And I didn't even realize then as I got out. And it's also just about doing, I went on to, if you look at how to hack COVID, it's everything to do with getting your house ready or your room ready or getting something cleaned. At no point does it talk about what you actually enjoy doing. So I think it's just really important for you to, yes, I know you are dealing with being by yourself and things like that, but also try to do some of the things that you really enjoy, whether it's talking to a friend on the phone for a few minutes, or arranging a Zoom game night. Me and the girls done that, something like that. Or if it's just listening to your favorite album or reading your favorite book, get yourself lost in something that you actually enjoy, rather than it being for productivity. So for your house, painting the outskirts of the house, that's not something that's going to help you with your mental health. Look, I'm not going to knock anyone down who obviously DIY does help them, but those who don't, that might be a good way just to go down it, is try to just do something that you actually really enjoy and that doesn't require another person, so that you really enjoy doing by yourself, and just be present in that moment. So try to remember what it feels like to do your most favorite activity, and it just helps you with dealing with the aspect of what we're currently going through. And that would be really my advice. I don't have I wish I did have a kind of guide to hacking COVID. Unfortunately I don't, but I just doing something that you enjoy, that you really enjoy, no matter what it is, and actually just allowing yourself to be present in that moment and in enjoying the activity and whatever it may be.
Brilliant. Maybe Sarah, I'll come to you next.
I just should have went first because that's everything I was going to say. I mean, my go-to thing is all about finding something that you really enjoy. I mean, my big thing is I love my music, and I love with my music, and sometimes not even with earphones in my head, but literally playing it as loud as I possibly can here in the room. And I think I might take it just from a different angle slightly, and that is, for me, I think, sometimes it's also about human contact. And I would suggest going the other way. In other words, connect in with some of your friends, as you said about, catching up with them on Zoom or whatever, but even just picking up a phone and ringing somebody and saying, how are you doing? Like, how's things going with you? Like, because you don't know also who is your friends may be sitting there on their own wondering what to do. And I think I have found that beneficial for myself, that, picking up the phone and ringing my friend Claire and saying, how are you? What's going on? What's happening in your life? And just chatting for 15, 20 minutes or whatever, the same way as you might do if you went for a cup of coffee or you went for lunch or you went out in the evening time, just trying to create that time and space for doing things that, okay, you might be doing them in a different way. I've found the benefit of Zoom, doing Zoom hangouts on a Friday evening, albeit with a glass of wine, but, and finding myself at 2 o'clock in the morning, still chatting away one-to-one on a Zoom call. I think that's probably, do those things like go for a walk, do take time out and sit down and enjoy things, whether it's reading a book or whether it's listening to music, but also maybe reach out as well, connect in with other individuals that kind of, and don't talk about school or work or, things that's going to be the chore of the day. Talk about life, what you miss, what you're enjoying, what you like doing generally. And I think that'd be, for me, something definitely would help.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Katie or Steph, would you like to come in?
I'm just going to say, make sure to eat your meals regularly. Don't forget that, food, we might be all like, with lockdown, you could eat 12 hours a day. Try and maintain your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. Try and maintain some bit of a routine. Get up in the morning, make your bed, shower. Just make sure that you're looking after yourself physically as well as mentally.
Brilliant. I love it. And Steph, would you like to?
Yeah. So my advice for the whole self-care side, I have a very corrupt mind and I swear like a sailor, and I'm very tailored on video calls. But if you Google swear word coloring pages, trust me, it will be the best thing you ever did in your life. There are so many swear words and you just color them in and they look amazing. And you could just think of every person you want to use that word and just throw it at them and just color it in, and it's awesome. And also, I found out that naps are a form of self-care. Always.
I love a nap.
Take a nana nap. Not a 4-hour sleep, but like a nana nap, an hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
Recharge those batteries. That is self-care and it's amazing. But as for the COVID stuff, I've been working in a community centre, so we actually do virtual drop-ins of virtual coffee mornings, which is great. So do connect with your friends. We have technology, thankfully, for a reason, but also Kahoot, if anyone is looking for a fun and easy way to connect with their friends. Kahoot quiz design. It's brilliant. You can design your own quizzes. I did it with my friends. We had a RuPaul round, we had a queer history round, we had a general knowledge round, and you can go as corrupt as your mind will allow. So we had an X-rated round as well because yours truly designed it. So yeah, just tie in with as many free things as you can throughout COVID as well. There's so many free online courses. I think I saw a course on like jam making as well. Like, so just go do it. You'll end up with a random certificate in how to make your own jam. So just take advantage of everything that is free at the moment. And as students, we like free things.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I suppose just for myself, my piece of advice to students watching and students who might watch this back would be everything that you have all just said. And remember, like, link in, and this is not like a shameless self-promotion of the Students Union, but we are putting events on to try and, because we know you students are feeling isolated and at home and they're not connecting with their class, and we're feeling like that as well. So if we're feeling like that and we have about 10 meetings a day, and we're actually talking to people, we know you are feeling like that. So link in with us on events and ways to get involved and stuff. There's like, even if you know, normally you'd meet like-minded people in college and you're not getting that chance to face-to-face, chances are there's a society or a club there that would meet you, and they're all meeting virtually. So that would be my piece of advice, I suppose, for students, would be to get involved. Link in, we can point you in the right direction, and not to be afraid to speak. Use the services that are there. We've nurses and counsellors on campus. Use them. Use us, your Students Union, to link you in with clubs, societies, and ways to get involved. And like that, stay connected. Really don't be on your own feeling down or isolated, and do reach out and talk to people. But I'm not going to waffle, because we have been on for so long and I really appreciate it. And I'd really like to just really extend, I know Aisling has left already, but on behalf of the Students Union, thank Steph, Sarah, Katie, Nitsoki, and I will learn how to pronounce that name, Nitsoki.
You can
I'm
call me CK.
so sorry.
It's been my name for like 18 years now.
Okay. CK, and of course Aisling, who left, for being a wonderful panelist and for being so honest and forthcoming with your answers, and for giving up so much of your time. Really, really genuinely and truly honestly appreciate it. So thank you very much. I know you can't